Hello, my listeners. Today I want to speak, and I feel it with someone else, but not the man that I love. A couple came to me, separate bedrooms at this point. She said she wanted more than what she called a wham bam, thank you, ma'am. He heard this with criticism and shut down when I said it takes 40 minutes for a woman to be engorged enough to be penetrated. That completely blew his mind. And when the camera stopped rolling, he said, yeah, I don't have time for that. Her answer or her response, you could see it in her body. She shut down. So she said she wanted to feel wanted. He heard rose petals and romance and thinking that he could never get it right. They hadn't agreed on anything for quite a while, for months. Bringing up children together, the one thing they agreed on is what kind of food and that they get a healthy lifestyle. So I stopped sitting them down to talk about feelings and I got them up and took them to the kitchen instead. If you see the clip, you'll laugh at the narrator. So I asked him to make her a cup of tea. This is one of the exercises that I use in my workshops all over the world. And it's so stupidly simple, yet it's so deceptive. I explained to him, I said, I'd like you to ask her how she wants her tea. And I explained to her, I said, be very precise. Put a tea station out, different kind of cups, different kinds of silverware, lemon, different teas, different milks, different sweeteners. I said, be really precise. Shall I demonstrate? I said, yes. I said, I'd like you to take the blue cup with the saucer with the gold little rim on it. I'd like you to put a tea bag of Bengal spice in it. Add the water to it, the hot boiling water from the kettle. And then I want you to stir it twice. Take the tea bag out with the spoon. Don't squeeze it because that leaves too much tannin. And then put the tea bag on the saucer with the spoon, just in case I do want it stronger. And he already raised his eyebrows like, wow. Made the sound like, I was like, that's a lot, right? I said, no, I'd like you to repeat back to me exactly what I said. So he repeated back. That was a trial run. And he got it pretty much right. Then I asked her to do it. So she laughed a little bit, got a little bit embarrassed, quiet. I said, no, go ahead. Ask for the tea exactly how you desire it. Not for what's easy, but exactly how you want it. So she went ahead and asked for what she wanted. He reflected back again, got it mostly right. And then I said, hey, he forgot this. So adjust him. If you can adjust him in the way he makes tea, then of course, we can take that much further, but I'll get back to that. So he went off, made her the tea, brought it to her, and at first her eyes lit up. And then I noticed that little, tiniest of braces in her jaw and just slight tightening of her back. And I said, so what is it? I was like, no, adjust him. So I said, so what you do now is you give him a shit sandwich. So the first part, thank you for getting me the tea in exactly the right cup or whatever he's done right? So that's the good part of the sandwich. Then the shit part. And I'd like you to go back and change whatever needs to be changed. And then the other part of the sandwich is, and thank you for doing that for me. I love it when you bring me tea or whatever, Good adjustment, good. The thing that he did right. So he took that and kind of got a little bit annoyed at it, like huffing, puffing, rolling his eyes. And it's like, hey, if you're like this about a cup of tea, can you imagine how difficult she finds it to ask you to go a bit slower, a bit to the left, a bit to the right? Anyway, he went, brought it back to her, slammed it down, and this tea spilled everywhere. And I noticed her bracing. And I was like, hey, I intervened. I said, let's do that over again. And this is the beauty where we don't always get it right, but we can just pause and say, let's do that over again. So he went back, got it just right. And his little boy that wants to please came out. And you never know what's gone on for him, right, in his life. So he brought it back to her, put it down in front of her, looked up quite expectantly, like, did I get it right? And when she took that first taste, her whole body just expanded, glowing, and like tears filled her eyes. And it's like, yes, this is exactly what I wanted. Thank you. And genuinely, that moment was such a beautiful moment of connection. And where I want to pause now is actually, if you can do this outside the bedroom, then you can start taking it to what kind of touch do you want? The expectation of what we may ask for, that it's too much, that, we're demanding too much. This actually means that we don't get the touch that we want and we just take scraps. And this is why every time I run this exercise, either with couples or in workshops, I get the incredible feedback saying something this simple was so impactful. And that's what it is. It is just something simple. But once you know how to ask for what you want, to give the adjustments, then it takes away that awkwardness in the bedroom. They're like, hey, let's try that. So next, I asked her if she wanted to be fed. And of course, she said yes. She wanted to be fed with a strawberry from his mouth. The way he responded was like, oh, no, that's disgusting. So that was a hard no for him. Her reaction was giggling a little bit, like, oh, I asked for what I want just after the tea exercise and can't have it. So then I did what I did. I asked her to close her eyes, to smell the raspberry that I was tracing on her lips, to smell it, to actually allow herself to feel it. Because when you take one of the senses away, all the senses get massively heightened. I asked for permission. I read her body. And often this is what's missing. The asking for permission, the slowness. So stick your tongue out, place the raspberry on it. I had already clocked her pleasure language. So I touched her on her chest. I said, good girl. And the little frisson that came through her body, the gasp afterwards, like, my God, that was sensational. So that brings me back to, why can you feel it with a stranger and not him? Like, because a stranger sees you with curiosity. It asks nothing from you. That kind of touch, you know that it's not going to lead to sex. This is not something that your body is wired for. The Pilates instructor that may hold your foot a tiny bit too long and you're feeling that, whew, all of a sudden your body's alive again because nothing is at stake. You're not trying to preempt where this is going. Now, with your husband, with your partner, somehow touch got loaded. Oftentimes, the little stroke on the neck, the nuzzle, the snuggle, the kissing on your earlobe has a path. Your body learned to brace before his hand even arrives. That's, your brace is not rejecting him. It's just knowing the path, and you may not be ready for that. It's running on old information. So what you can do to change this is tonight, today, this week, take 10 minutes. One of you goes and makes the other the cup of tea. One of you first asks for it. You do exactly what I explained. The other person receives it fully. Adjustment. Do a little shit sandwich. And then keep adjusting it until it is just right. Yes, it may be a hell of awkward at first. And this is where the beauty is. If you can stay with that awkwardness in a cup of tea, can you imagine what that can happen when he touches you here? You say, hey, can you go to the left a little bit? Because it's all building capacity. Let me tell you what I've watched happen and what's on the other side of this. A couple came to me, they hadn't had sex in 23 years of loving each other, but of, yeah, not tonight, maybe later, and of trying and rejection. And honestly, for both of them, 3 months into this, first we took sex off the table. Not difficult because it hadn't been done in so many years. And 3 months later, they went on a second honeymoon. They had their best year in business. And what I want to say too, that it's not isolated. What's happening in your personal life, in your touch life, in your sex life, always bleeds into everything else. Because that energy that's stuck there, that's not being released, that's not finding an endpoint, that's not finding that connection, those cross wires. Once they get uncrossed and they get rewired properly, then it just affects everything. And that's what you get. Not the massive fireworks, but touch that lands, safety that builds into your body. And from there on, that's what you can build. So your body didn't stop wanting him. It stopped feeling open enough and safe enough to really open. That's the pattern. And patterns can change. This is a Scrumptious Woman, and I will see you next week.